Yo, Dropgun family, Jonah here, back with another tutorial for ya. We're gonna be diving into an artist style, and I'm extremely excited to break down this project for you guys because today we're gonna be talking about how to make a drop in the style of BYOR.
Do what you want when you here with me. Watch me do my thing, stop. I'm going big, drop. I'm going in, drink, and then repeat. Do what you want when you here with me.
BYOR has been making waves in all kinds of house music with tracks like Keep On Dancing and Belly Dancer. He's oftentimes known for his signature sound design. We were lucky enough to have BYOR create a signature pack for us. With amazing samples, some killer vocals, presets for Serum and Silent that has everything you need to make a track in his style. Head on over to the link in the description to check that out. So here today, I have a song in the style of BYOR using only sounds from that pack. So let's pick it apart and talk about what makes his sound so great. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's get right into it. Alright, so let's listen to this full project one more time to start off, and note that we're actually using a vocal from this BYOR pack.
Watch me do my thing, stop. I'm going big, drop. I'm going in, drink, and then repeat. Do what you want when you here with me. Watch me do my thing, stop. I'm going big, drop. I'm going in, drink, and then repeat. Do what you want when you here with me.
That is awesome.
Thank you. You're good. You're a good audience, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
What I really love about BYOR's sound selection and the pack that he made for us is that you could really fill the space out so much with so little. There's an emphasis on simple melodic structure, which is very effective. But before we dive into melodies, let's talk about why he's able to make those melodies hit so hard. That being the drums. One thing I've noticed in these BYOR tracks is that he's able to really make you pay attention to what's happening in the synth and the bass line because he's not throwing any complex drum structures in your face. Oftentimes, as a house producer, it's really easy to overcomplicate your drums. I'm guilty of it too. But artists like BYOR show us what's possible with simple drum structures when you build them off of very solid samples. Yes, his kicks are perfect.
Oh, beautiful.
And I don't throw around that word lightly. They punch hard and they leave enough space on the tail to shine through. His claps are fat, tight, punchy, and present. The front transients of his tops are nice and full, allowing him to use shorter samples and leave more space for the synths. But first, let's look at this kick. So, this kick is very punchy. All I did was throw on an EQ, pulled a tiny bit off the top, and left on a low cut that I could automate on and off during the breaks and the fills to bring out the sub. And notice how it's really just falling short of half a beat. The space left over in this second half of the beat is what really lets his signature bass sounds come through. And even though it's short, the signal packs quite a punch. So now let's look into the clap, and similarly to the kick, we have this nice punchy sample. It's really short, but very present during its signal. I did a little bit of a low cut just to make sure that it's not clashing with the kick, and I like how it fits right into the pocket of the beat. And notice how this sample is also very short, very transient. It's not taking up a lot of space. It's really leaving that space for the sounds and the synth line to come through. Now, let's move into the hi-hats. And I have all of the hi-hats from the sample pack into a sampler like this. And the sampler, along with the rest of the percussion in the track, are feeding into this group, which is sidechained with LFO tool. Now, as I was stating before, BYOR doesn't like to throw a bunch of drum sounds in your face. He likes to leave that space for more action in the synth line and more character in the bass. I made these hats kind of based on the structure of Belly Dancer, so there's a strong emphasis on a big open hi-hat. And notice how that open hi-hat isn't really crossing over into the next beat, it's just falling short and making sure that that space is available. We have the closed hat here on the downbeat just to give some extra texture to the kick so long that it's sidechained as well. And then we have an offbeat closed hat right here that's happening every 4 bars just to give it a little bit of humanization. I gave this channel some multiband saturation, mainly to add a little bit of tape saturation to the highs, add some color to those frequencies, blend them all together, maybe reduce a little bit of hiss. And then always make sure you're shaving off those bottom frequencies. Now right below it we have this awesome percussion loop from BYOR's pack. It sounds like it has a little bit of a shaker tambourine combination with a high pass tom of some sort. And this does that last little bit of filling out the drum line without oversaturating the track with too many percussion sounds. So as you can see, the trick here isn't to do some crazy intricate drum structure. The trick is to choose samples that are punchy and hit hard, but don't take up too much actual time in your track. And now that we've looked at what makes BYOR's drums hit so hard, let's jump into the bass lines and look at that signature bass. So with his tracks, he writes some very catchy melodies, and I feel like he takes some influences in his bass lines from maybe slap house or deep house, but there's definitely always really good, memorable melodies in BYOR's tracks on the bass line. One thing to note about BYOR's bass lines is that he commonly brings in his Eastern European influence with the Phrygian scale.
Gross, right now.
Phrygian.
An eyeball.
The Phrygian scale is a dark, mysterious scale that uses a flat iteration of the second interval from the typical minor scale. One thing to notice here is the placement of the notes within the melodic sequence. He has lots of quarter and eighth note basses that promote this very bouncy feel and interrupts them with a couple 16th note stabs. These extra little 16th note shots really help drive the groove of the track. And the last thing to notice here is on the tail end of the bass line, there's these extra steps that go up in the melody and keep the whole structure interesting. But obviously, one of the most important factors here is his signature bass sound, and for that, we have Silence. This sound is from the pack, and I think it makes the whole pack worth it alone. We have a saw wave here with one voice down an octave, and a square wave here with a whole 8 voices, detuned a bit and down 2 octaves. Oscillator A is going through the filter, and it's modulated by envelope 2 for the pluck factor. But the most important part of the sound is actually the pitch envelope right here. This pitch movement is what gives the bass that slapping attack. And at the end of the bass, he just finishes it off with a little bit of compression. If you look here in the automation lane, I'm kind of just automating the cutoff of the filter over here to create some movement during the bass line. For processing, I've got a multiband saturator going here that's just bringing out some color in the highs and mids. I also have a multiband compressor to make sure that it's staying level whenever it gets to those open moments. And finally, I just finish it off here with an EQ on the lows, just pulling them off to leave room for the sub. For the sub layer, we have this nice warm sub bass from the pack and Serum, and I'm really just cutting off those highs and leaving space for that top layer, and together they should sound like this.
Oh, that's hot.
One last thing to note here is this little flare on the main bass right before the drop. This is a trick that I picked up from listening to Belly Dancer, and if you look, I just automated the attack of the envelope in Silence and gave it this little lead in. Alright, so we've looked at the drums, we've broken down that signature bass line. Let's start looking at some of these leads and synths. As a synth-heavy producer, this BYOR pack is loaded with sounds that could really fill up your space. In this track, I'm showcasing some of the awesome stabs available as well as one of his signature lead sounds. To start, we have this synth stab right here, right on the first downbeat and carrying us out of the drop in that fill space. This is really just helping sell that impact. You could achieve the same sound with any sort of brass stab, super saw, respace, whatever you think can fill in that space. Next, we have this brass stab in Silence that's kind of following the melody of the bass line. It's a similar combination of wavetables here to the bassline. We have a single voice saw wave, a 8 voice square wave. The big difference here is that the envelope is more sustained and allowing the sound to carry on for longer. I first have this running through Cymatics Diablo for some extra hard clipping. We have an EQ here, just maintaining it, cutting off those lows and any high frequencies that might be getting in the way of the other sounds. And to complete that brass stab, it's good to add a little bit of hall reverb or room reverb to drown it out and give it a bit of a tail. We have a couple more sounds here from the pack filling up space, like this 16th note sequence and this high frequency growl that are just adding some character to the dull moments. Both of these sounds are from Serum and available in the pack the way you hear them now. But moving on, let's look into this second half of the Drops lead, which is this sound that is definitely one of BYOR's signature leads. So what I did here was copy the bassline melody into the synth lane and chop up some of the notes to be a little bit more like his style. He utilizes quick 16th notes in his synths to bring them to the forefront, so I chopped some of these notes up. The synth is in Serum. You have a sine wave and a saw wave working together on this, and both have one voice. The sine wave has that little bit of bend warping to bring out some extra texture, and the saw wave is actually receiving frequency modulation from the sine. We also have some noise in the form of AC hum under the organics menu, which is just adding some extra texture to the top of the sound. LFO1 is controlling most of the envelope of the sound. Right here, it's routed to the level of the white noise. It's also on the level of oscillator B, and it's also routed bidirectionally on the cutoff of the filter. It's also very important that you route it to the FM warping on oscillator B as well. Speaking of that filter, we're running a low pass 12 decibel curve. There's not much going on with the drive or the resonance, just make sure that you have oscillators A, B, and the noise oscillator routing through it. For effects, we have the tube distortion with a little extra drive. We've got some chorus, and make sure you open up that low pass filter, multiband compression, and an EQ that's kind of boosting the highs. For processing, I started with some multiband saturation. We have mostly the tape and retro saturators being used here just on the high and mids to bring them out, add some color, some texture. I also use some OTT to fatten it up and bring out some of those lower dynamics. I have reverb on the sound as well, and I actually automate the signal of the reverb up whenever there's no notes playing, just to fill in the space a little bit and create a bit of a reverb ghost effect. Something I've definitely heard a lot of in BYOR's tracks. And that about wraps it up for the synth line here on the track. So now that we've talked about the synth work that makes BYOR's songs so great, let's look a little bit at these fills and effects that he left us and how he uses them. And to start, looking at these drum fills, I noticed that they're right in theme with his other drum sounds, which is very tight, very short, but also very punchy and powerful. Let's check out a few of those here. And when in context, notice how these fills aren't in your face and jarring. They're really just nicely flowing from the beat and carrying the song into the next section. I think oftentimes we just throw our biggest drum samples at fills trying to make them fit, and we forget that it's more about the energy and how you're transitioning it from section to section. Moving into these effects, one that I want to point out is this crazy moving white noise. This is an effect that BYOR uses in a lot of his tracks. It's a white noise that's either on an LFO or on a gating effect that's slowing down and also moving left to right. This sample is in the pack, and you can see how nicely it fits in the space. Keeping on with that, I noticed that he definitely loves his white noise impact, so we have another hard white noise shot right here. One thing to note is that you should definitely maintain all of these white noises with tight EQs. He also left us this little laser, which works great on the downbeat. And here's a final little sweep to finish off that mid-drop fill. Alright, so we've talked about all of the sounds that make this drop hit so hard. Let's really quickly talk about the buildup. I made this buildup with Belly Dancer in mind, and the beauty of it is that it's really just made to complement what's happening in the drop. No crazy tricks necessary, it's just about making the track flow, making it approachable, and just feeling right. So first things first, I resampled all of the drums in their entirety into this one sample right here. I cut out all the lows and moved up a high cut automation to build it up before the drop.
I'm going there. And then repeat. Do what you want when you're here with me.
You naughty, naughty. You teasing me, you naughty, naughty.
While that happens for the last 4 bars of the build-up, for the entire 8 bars, we do have this guitar sample from the pack, and all I did was repitch it a little bit to make sure it's in line with the melody of the track.
Watch me do my thing, stop. I'm going big, drop. I'm going in.
This type of sound just really acts as a melodic anchor for the build-up and all of the breaks in the track. And then finally, we have a basic synth from the pack here. It's really just a saw lead that I filtered out and added a ton of reverb and delay to act as ambience during the build-up. Now, put that all together with the vocal and you have a BYOR style track. Let's listen to it one more time.
Watch me do my thing, stop. I'm going big, drop. I'm going in, drink, and then repeat. Do what you want when you're here with me. Watch me do my thing, stop. I'm going big, drop. I'm going in, drink, and then repeat. Do what you want when you're here with me.
That's going to be it for me today, guys. I really appreciate you tuning in. I hope you learned a bit about how BYOR builds his tracks and what makes them so great. Head on over to our website and grab the pack so you can make tracks like this too. Big thank you and shout out to BYOR for making this amazing pack for us. Please leave us a like and subscribe if you learned something here. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to comment below. And make sure you follow all of our accounts on socials to stay updated. Keep working, stay motivated, and I will see you guys again very soon.